Holy crap, did Kong punch a lot of stuff in this movie. I think he'll be ready for his bout with Godzilla in 2020. Kong Skull Island is the second film in the Monsterverse created by Legendary Pictures, following 2014's Godzilla, this time directed by Kings of Summer's Jordan Vogt-Roberts. This film introduces a brand new interpretation of Kong and Skull Island, set during the 1970s on the outset of the Vietnam War. In this film, Monarch, the shady government organization that were behind the ongoings in Godzilla, are in search this time of this legendary island, Skull Island. And they lead this expedition with the US military to try and map out the island. While this initially gets everyone on board for this expedition, eventually Monarch's intentions become very clear as to why they're there. Now, Kong, first of all, is a visual spectacle. He moves realistically, and every moment on screen with him is really, really exciting, as it should be. The action with Kong is absolutely incredible. I think Legendary definitely heard the complaints with Godzilla, where we didn't get a whole lot of screen time with Godzilla. So with this film, straight out of the bat, you get King Kong. He's in the film from very early on, and he's peppered out through the film, and his final showdown at the end is really, really incredible. Some of the fights in this are really kind of cheer-worthy and really worth standing up in your seat and cheering, or maybe not, you don't have to do that, but they're really quite enjoyable. And there are times where some of the spectacle can kind of feel like a theme park ride, but it's not always the case. I mean, you're usually right there in the thick of it. There are moments where the camera puts you right in Kong's face as, say, a helicopter is going down, and you're sort of watching the horror from the pilots and military soldiers' perspectives. But every time Kong is on screen, it's absolutely incredible. It's so exciting to watch him fight and just interact with the human characters and all the other monsters on this Skull Island. Now, the Skull Crawlers, as you might have seen from the trailers, are the big bad monsters that Kong fights in this film, while we also do have a human villain in Samuel L. Jackson as sort of this weary, scarred war veteran, and also kind of John Goodman's character who represents Monarch. But with Samuel L. Jackson's character, it's almost like watching Jules from Pulp Fiction in this sort of army getup, and you're sort of watching him go to war with King Kong throughout this film, which is quite fun, quite exciting. It's almost over the top Samuel L. Jackson, but it's sort of just enough just to have a bit of fun with the film, which really is what you're here to watch a King Kong movie about. You're really here for a fun time. But the Skull Crawlers as the foes that Kong has to face are really genuinely scary and quite frightening, and really put up quite a great battle with Kong, and you really get a great few fights out of the Skull Crawlers with Kong, and they're really quite exciting to watch. Much like with Godzilla, when Godzilla finally showed up for his big fights, you're not let down by the fights. The fights are just really fun to watch. It's everything you kind of want out of these types of monster movies, except in this case, unlike with Godzilla, we're not pulling away during the early acts of the film when we're about to see Godzilla. We get King Kong throughout this. We see King Kong throughout this. There's no little teasers or pullaways. You've got Kong throughout the film. As with a lot of monster movies and kaiju films, the weak point is obviously the humans in this case, and mainly just comes down to how they have been written. In this case, I mean, we've got actors like Brie Larson and Tim Hiddleston and John Goodman, even Toby Kebbell, and these characters don't really have a whole lot of depth to them. Like, Brie Larson is a war photographer, and that's pretty much her entire character. She doesn't really do a whole lot. She almost plays the Ann Darrow character, kind of, which you've seen in the previous King Kong films, like from Peter Jackson. And she has those little elements, but it's not really her focus, and she doesn't really get a whole lot of depth given to her. Tom Hiddleston is this tracker who used to be in, I think, the British Navy services during the Vietnam War, but he's sort of this everyman and can kind of do everything. But while Tom Hiddleston plays him really well, it's just, he can kind of get away with a bit too much than you'd sort of like, and it's not quite as believable as you'd think, even though it's just a summer blockbuster popcorn film, but we'd still like probably maybe a little bit more believability with what Tom Hiddleston can kind of pull off. Like, I mean, there's a point in the film where Tom Hiddleston's character can just straight up use a samurai sword, and apparently we're to believe that he's gifted in using the samurai sword, which hasn't really been set up prior to this. I mean, there's a little moment at the very start of the film where you see him use a pull cue as a weapon, but that's kind of the only real correlation that you get with anything sort of as close to a samurai sword, I guess. He's an everyman that can kind of do a bit of everything a bit too easily. And John Goodman is kind of just used as exposition. He just sort of informs the audience of what Monarch is and what Monarch are looking for and their position in Kong Skull Island, and has that little tether and connection to Godzilla. However, the one thing that people were kind of worried about from the trailers was John C. Reilly and his moment in the trailers, but in all honesty, he's actually the standout and probably the best part of the entire film. I mean, he really does shine more than pretty much most of the other, and he's probably given some of the better lines, better dialogue throughout the film. I mean, most of the dialogue is pretty basic and pretty simple. It's really just designed to sort of get you to quickly get to know these characters so that you can move on to getting to Skull Island or getting to the next fight with Kong. There are sort of moments of comedy that are sort of peppered throughout, but they only really land and work when John C. Reilly is delivering them. All the other characters sort of attempt humor, but they never really sort of pay off, and it really is a test to how surprising John C. Reilly actually is in this film, and how much of a kind of a treasure he is with this film. He really pays off, and it's actually quite heartwarming in some moments with John C. Reilly. So don't be frightened by his appearance in the trailers. It's worth seeing this movie for John C. Reilly alone, apart from Kong. But yeah, the film is very quickly edited. The first act of the film is sort of more interested in getting you to quickly get to know some of these characters so you can get to Skull Island as quickly as possible, which is kind of a stark difference to, say, Peter Jackson's King Kong, where you spent all this time, probably a bit too much time, waiting to get to Skull Island, whereas here they set things up pretty quickly and they're sort of off to go to Skull Island, and before you know it, the group is come into contact with Kong, so you don't have to worry about waiting around for people to get to Skull Island. But yeah, no, unfortunately having these great big monster movies does come at the cost of having the human characters sort of underwritten. So hopefully with future films, as this is the second installment in this Monsterverse universe that Legendary has created, we're going to see Godzilla and King Kong fight in 2020 with the Godzilla vs. King Kong film. Godzilla will return in 2019 with Godzilla King of the Monsters, and we'll probably get us a proper sequel for King Kong after those films are out. But there is kind of a universe that is being built here, and sometimes it feels like the film is more interested in creating this shared universe than being a true standalone film, which, even though some people disliked 2014's Godzilla for showing less of Godzilla during that film, it still felt more like a solid film altogether. It wasn't really as concerned with trying to set up this whole Monsterverse. Either way, it is kind of exciting to see these monsters sort of come into play. We know Legendary has the rights to monsters such as Mothra and King Ghidorah and Rodan, so these monsters are going to show up eventually, and we'll have a bigger monster universe down the line. But hopefully they'll be more focused on creating more solid films that just happen to have sort of connections to these other characters, but these films aren't focused on just solely promoting other films that are down the pipeline. There is also a post-credit scene, so you do have to wait around till the very end of the credits, but it is worth it, especially if you're kind of looking forward to these Monsterverse films. It's worth sticking around to the very end. And also, just quickly, I mean, the music in this film is obviously very much inspired by the music of during Vietnam in the 70s. So you get a lot of Creedence Clearwater and Black Sabbath and all sorts of different bands from the 70s that get played during the film, and there's actually quite a lot of needle drops throughout the film, so you get quite a good variety of different 70s era music. Ultimately, yeah, you're going to want to see this film for the spectacle. I mean, I saw this in quite a large theater with surround sound, and you really did feel the impact of each of the fight scenes. I mean, they were absolutely breathtaking to watch. So if you're going to see this film, you're going to see it for King Kong. You want to watch him fighting these skull crawlers and different monsters during the film, and that's really it for someone who's a fan of monster movies. That's all you're going to really want. If you did want something with some stronger characters, you might not get that here, but for people who sort of want a fun summer blockbuster in March, this is going to be probably your first proper summer blockbuster film, then this is going to be it, and it is worth seeing at the theater for that spectacle alone, and maybe even John C. Reilly. Don't be too shocked if some of the other characters don't quite live up to what you'd expect of someone like Jordan Vogt-Roberts, who directed a very character-heavy film in Kings of Summer, which is a bit of the opposite here. But anyway, I'm going to go with a 7.5 out of 10 for Kong Skull Island. Let me know if you've seen it or if you plan to see it. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. You can also subscribe to the channel, and you can also follow me at the Mono Report on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you, and go enjoy Kong Skull Island. Bye.